Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Levinson. I am the Chair of the Travel Industry Council of Ontario. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. We should note that today is September 11th, which is the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks where 24 Canadians perished. The 9/11 attacks forever changed the travel industry. I'd also like to acknowledge that TECO's office is located in the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today and every day, TECO honors the enduring presence of the Indigenous peoples, their voices and culture as part of our commitment to a more diverse and inclusive workplace and society. I do want to let you know that today's session is being recorded and will be posted on TECO's website. During this webinar, we'll be discussing TECO's proposed law changes and articles of amendment. These changes are necessary to align with the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, as well as general governance matters. Other regulators and not-for-profit organizations are going through the same exercise to ensure ongoing compliance with this legislation. Today's session is designed to walk you through the key aspects of the proposed amendments, providing you with information you need to understand how these changes will impact TECO's governance. We're hosting this webinar in advance of TECO's annual general meeting, which will take place on Tuesday, September 24th at 5 p.m. TECO's board of directors have reviewed and approved this revised bylaw, subject to ratification by the members. At the AGM, voting members will be asked to vote on proposed changes for confirmation and approval. If you haven't registered for the AGM yet, the details can be found in the notice of AGM on TECO's website. Now, joining me today are John Wilkinson, partner at Weir Felds LLP, Richard Smart, TECO's CEO, Tracy McKernan, TECO's General Counsel and Corporate Secretary, and Christina Wilson, TECO's Stakeholder Relations Manager. We have a short presentation for you today, and we'll then move to a Q&A where you are welcome any questions you may have related to the bylaw amendments and articles of amendment. I'll now turn it over to John Wilkinson, who will guide us through the details of the proposed changes. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Michael. So I want to take you through the bylaw and articles of amendment provisions. First of all, bylaw number 1 is being changed, as Michael said, to comply with Ontario's new Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. That statute has been in place for about 3 years, and there is a deadline coming up, which TECO is complying with. As well, TECO will be addressing the need to file articles of amendment, and those have been prepared in accordance with the ONCA's requirements. As has been mentioned, the TECO Board of Directors have approved the form of the updated bylaw and the form of the articles of amendment, and they will be brought forth to the annual meeting. With respect to ONCA, although it's dated 2010, it was actually brought into force in 2021. And TECO, along with other nonprofits, have to update their bylaws to comply with ONCA by October 18th, 2024 this year. A failure to meet that deadline will essentially result in automatic amendments to TECO's bylaws to comply with ONCA. And if the wording of the bylaws is not changed, it will be unclear and practically there's no ability to understand what the bylaws mean. If there are non-compliant provisions in the TECO bylaw as of that date, those provisions will be superseded by the provisions of the Act. And as I mentioned, it'll be difficult to understand what bylaws say in the context of the statute. With respect to the articles of amendment, they are to be filed under ONCA in order to comply with certain ONCA provisions, and I'll mention more about those in a moment. With respect to the ONCA bylaw amendments, there are a few that I want to go through. In particular, the definitions and certain terminology used in the bylaw have been updated based on ONCA. For example, there is now a reference to ordinary resolutions, special resolutions, to distinguish between those two types of resolutions for members' meetings. The first being a 50% majority, the latter being a 2/3 majority. As well, and importantly in this day and age, language regarding virtual meetings of members and of directors has been updated. In particular, members can attend virtual meetings as long as they can reasonably participate in the meeting through the virtual mechanisms offered. As well, electronic voting is now permissible both under ONCA and the bylaws. And finally, with respect to directors' meetings, as long as directors can communicate simultaneously and instantaneously at the meeting, then the virtual meeting is acceptable. To allow for meetings to be held and for those who are to come to the meetings being properly notified, the meeting notice provision in the bylaws has been updated to allow for electronic notices. As well, the proxy provisions in the bylaw have been updated to comply with ONCA requirements. In particular, it is now necessary to explicitly say that a member may appoint a proxy holder, and the bylaws now say that. With respect to qualifications for directors, that wording has also been updated in compliance with ONCA. In particular, there are modernized statute references and explicit references to competency requirements both provincially and extra-provincially. The term president has been removed from the bylaw as unnecessary under ONCA. Under the predecessor statute, that term had to be used, but it is no longer necessary. Finally, with respect to these types of amendments, ONCA's approach regarding director and officer identification and its approach regarding conflicts of interest have been adopted and incorporated into the bylaw in sections 1210 and 13.4, respectively. At the time of the review of the bylaw, in order to be ONCA compliant, a number of general governance bylaw amendments were also made. Some of these are basic in nature, but they make the bylaw more readable. Definitions have been moved from the back of the bylaw to the front of the bylaw. Outmoded references, such as members hearing all reports at meetings, have been removed. That was from an earlier age when reports were actually read in full at meetings, and that's not currently needed in this era of transparency and posting on websites. The section titled Objects with respect to the purposes of TICO has been deleted from the bylaws because those purposes and objects are already outlined in TICO's articles. References to dates that have been passed have been deleted. And finally, the quorum for members' meetings has been lowered to 5, allowing for members' meetings to occur with the lowest practical quorum. I mentioned earlier that articles of amendment are to be passed for compliance with ONCA. The articles of amendment themselves are a fairly short, 2-page short document on a government form. ONCA requires that a few items are to be included in this document. First, the nonprofit nature of TICO has been reiterated in the articles. Secondly, according to ONCA, it is necessary to list the membership classes of TICO and their voting rights, and the registrant members and the director members have been listed and their voting rights indicated in the articles of amendment. Finally, the provisions from bylaw number 1, which relate to the destination of assets on dissolution of the corporation in the unlikely event that that ever occurs, those provisions have also been added to the articles. Once the articles are approved by the members, having already been approved by the board, those articles will be filed with the Ontario Business Registry, and they'll be a public document. With that, happy to entertain any questions that may arise.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the raise a hand feature, and we can call on you to ask your question. If anybody would like to ask a question in the chat box as opposed to saying it verbally, that is also an option. So you can press on the chat feature at the bottom of the screen if you prefer to type out a question or a comment. Perhaps we'll give it a few more seconds to see if anything comes through.
Maybe an indication that John's done such a good job at explaining the amendments. That's all crystal clear.
I don't see any questions in the chat box or any raised hands from our participants.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all we have here today. So I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. I'll take this opportunity once more to remind that TECO's AGM is coming up on September 24th at 5 p.m. Registration is open until Friday, September 20th. You can find the registration details on the notice of AGM on TECO's website. Thank you again for attending today's webinar, and have a nice evening.